Well, hello everyone. I'm Chase Keller from Chase Keller Journalism, and thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. In today's video, I am continuing on the power ranking series. We have made it to number 29, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, last season kind of set a precedent for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as now that they have lost Tom Brady, they did retain a lot of the surround sound and a lot of the defense. The defense is still top tier, don't get me wrong, but without Tom Brady, this team has fallen off a bit. With the likes of Tristan Wirfs, Mike Evans, and Antoine Winfield, this team should be good on paper, but a lot of these positions are lacking depth, and as I mentioned, the quarterback is a little bit lackluster. If you do enjoy this video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. We still got 28 teams left to power rank. Number 1 will be revealed right before the beginning of the season, so subscribe to make sure you stay in tune with these power rankings. I gotta do this every video. Big shout out to that franchise guy. He inspired me to do this series and kind of have a reason to put every team where I power rank them. Seriously, go check out his channel. He's amazing. So without further ado, here is why the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are the 4th worst team in the NFL. So before I get into every position, I want to go over a quick summary of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in themselves. When you take importance into account, the offense is the worst positional group on the team. They received a 72.2, which is 30th in the NFL, 14th in the NFC, and last in the NFC South. The defense is the big bright side of this team, as they get a 74.75, which is 11th in the NFL, 5th in the NFC, and leading the NFC South. The special teams compared to the NFL is still pretty good. They got a 71.41, which is 20th in the NFL, 11th in the NFC, and last in the NFC South. And the coaching received a 4 out of 10, meaning they got a 74 rating. That is tied for 28th in the NFL, tied for 14th, which is last in the NFC, and tied for 3rd, which is last in the NFC South. So as an overall, I took 30% of 72.2, 26% of 74.75, 16% of 71.41, and 28% of 74, and brought in a 73.24 rating, which is 29th in the NFL, 13th in the NFC, and 4th in the NFC South. So let's get into the fun stuff, shall we? Let's start with quarterbacks, which earned a 73 flat, and originally this quarterback rating was much lower, but the signing here of Baker Mayfield has immensely helped this QB room and helped the Buccaneers not be last in the entire league. Personally, I thought Baker was next up after 2020, but boy was I wrong. He had a great year in 2020, 62.7% completion percentage, 4,030 passing yards, and 30 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, but only 2 years later, he plays for 2 different teams, had a 60% completion percentage, just over 2,000 passing yards, 10 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. So he's immensely fallen off. I don't want to give up on him immediately for 2 reasons. 1, it hasn't been too long since he was the 1st overall pick, and he still has showed flashes of greatness. And 2, the offensive coordinator, Dave Canales, which I'll get into later, is really good at developing quarterbacks. Yet Baker Mayfield has developed into a pocket passer, which has derailed his career a little bit, and he's also onto his 4th team in 3 seasons, which in itself is pretty concerning. Baker has really bad deep throw accuracy and consistency, and he has an inability to make big plays. He's also went 32 for 71 under pressure in 2022, and an overall decline in productivity has also continued to derail his career. Yet, he is still easily the best quarterback on this team. His decision-making has immensely improved. In 2022, he had a 2.9% turnover-worthy play rate, which was the 2nd best of his career, only behind 2020, and he is actually a pretty solid quarterback with a clean pocket. And then 10 overalls back, you had the backup quarterback in Kyle Trask. I was a fan of him coming out of college. I had a mid-second round grade on him, which was a 71 overall. He was my QB5, and I actually had him higher than Justin Fields. But nonetheless, we haven't seen him play. He was awful in Week 18 in 2022. Yeah, sure, he only played in 10 snaps, but in those 10 snaps, he went 3 for 9 for 23 yards, which is really bad. So at this point, it is extremely risky yet upside based to start Kyle Trask. but still, Baker Mayfield should easily be the starting quarterback going into week 1. Behind him, you have John Wolford, who did not contribute to this rating, but he is the third and last quarterback on this roster. And as I said before, the quarterbacks receive a 73.0 rating. Now let's move on to the running backs, which received a 74.3 overall grade. I originally had the running backs lower because of Rachaad White, but I have since upped the rating of Rachaad White, and it's because of his impressive start to his career. Sure, I had a late 4th round grade on him, even though he went in the 3rd round out of Arizona State, but he's went up 15 full rating points since he got drafted. A late 4th round pick talent gets a 63 to start his career, and he's all the way up to a 78. But what's so impressive about Rachaad White? He's got all around value in my opinion. He's not only a good rusher, sure he only averaged 3.8 yards per carry last year, but he's still a good and dominant rusher. He's also a good blocker in both the pass and the run, as well as a dual threat running back, seeing a lot of volume as a receiver out of the backfield as well. I didn't give Rachaad White a breakout grade, but I do think he's got breakout potential to be a top 10 running back in the NFL next year. After him, you have Chase Edmonds, which was a great signing this offseason when you note that he was only signed for 1 year and $1 million. Edmonds is efficient out of the backfield. He's also very disciplined as well. He's got great vision, he's got great patience, and he's only had 2 penalties in the last 5 seasons. So when you're looking at a backup running back, Edmonds almost epitomizes that. And then the final guy who contributed to this rating is undrafted rookie Sean Tucker. And I'm wondering how this guy went undrafted. I had a 3rd round talent on him, and he was the 2nd best available prospect after the draft, only behind edge rusher Andre Carter. Tucker is explosive from the snap. He's got great big play ability, but he also loses when it comes to deep speed and touchdown production. So he may not be a red zone back, but he may just be that short down back who can get you a couple of yards on a play. I did talk more about Sean Tucker in my top 10 running backs video going into the 2023 NFL draft. If you want to go check that out after this video, go ahead. It is linked in the description. But outside of those 3, the guys who did not contribute to the rating are Keyshawn Vaughn, Patrick Laird, and rookie Ronnie Brown. Moving on to the wide receivers, they get an 80.16, which is the best positional group on this entire roster, and you can understand why just from the top 2 receivers. We start with Mike Evans, who has gotten 1,000 yards in every season of his career, which has been his first 9 seasons. Evans has amazing vertical ability to jump up and get the ball. He's also got great ball security, as once he hauls in the football, he never fumbles. He's fumbled maybe, twice in the last few years? But he's also a quarterback's best friend, which makes Baker Mayfield's breakout potential rise. He's that guy who you can just throw the ball to and he'll make a play himself. He also lost 10 touchdowns from 2021 to 2022. He had 16 receiving touchdowns in 2021 with only 6 in 2022. He will also be 30 years old by the start of the season, which is a little bit more of a concern, but he still looks just as dominant as ever. And then your wide receiver 2 is another 87 overall in Chris Godwin. So Godwin is slowly starting to become the wide receiver 1 in Tampa's offense over Mike Evans when you take a look at how their careers have been shaping out the last couple of years. Godwin has great instincts, and he's just a natural ball catcher. He's always getting open in some way, shape, or form. Somehow he's bringing in the receptions. It could be on short routes, could be going deep. It could be in the backfield even. And that's because of his extremely consistent skill set that allows him to get open in these many ways. But with Baker Mayfield's struggles of going deep, you may have a bigger reliability on Mike Evans in the deep game. So Godwin may be stuck to a role, potentially being stuck to a check down or medium route kind of guy. And then after him, you have Russell Gage, who is an underrated wide receiver 3 for the NFL. I just think he's never had a bad season. His rookie season wasn't great, but still, he's an underrated wide receiver 3. His hands are also a little bit of an issue. He's dropping balls constantly, and that will need to change with the Buccaneers if he wants to be that reliable wide receiver 3. And then after that, you have 2 rookies who also contributed to the rating. There's Raheem Jarrett, who I thought was another top-notch undrafted free agent pickup. He was the best wide receiver available after the draft. He was number 10 in the entire draft, and he was the 5th best undrafted free agent available after. His appeal comes from the yards after catch. He may maybe a screen guy in Tampa's offense. He had 860 yards after the reception with Maryland in his 3 seasons. But teams likely avoided him because he's not great with route running. He's got a small route tree. He's got okay body control, and his route running just isn't appealing at all. And then you got Trey Palmer, who was the drafted rookie out of these 2 rookies, and he was a valuable draft pick out of the 6th round. Palmer is a shifty and speedy wideout, and I kind of compared him to Tyler Scott. They're very similar players, but Palmer had 10 drops in 2022, which is extremely concerning. But nonetheless, those 5 wide receivers make up to an 80.16 overall. The other receivers that do not contribute to this rating are new pickup David Moore, Devin Tompkins, Kalen Geiger, rookie Cade Warner, rookie Ryan Miller, and rookie Tay Barber. We go from the best positional group to the worst positional group, and that is the tight end being a 62.25. That is extremely lackluster, potentially the worst tight end group in the entire league. But that doesn't go without saying that their tight end 1 has my first of 2 breakout grades for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and that is Cade Otton. I had a late 4th round grade on him. He came out of Washington, and he may have Baker throwing him the football, but he showed flashes of being not only a receiving tight end, but also a good all-around blocking tight end. For receiving, he is a little bit lackluster at the moment, but he showed flashes of being really good. He had 6 catches for 43 yards week 5 versus Atlanta. He had 9 targets week 13 against New Orleans, and he had 4 catches for 58 yards against Dallas in the wild card round. And the only thing holding him back is the guy throwing the ball. Baker may rely on his more veteran targets in Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Russell Gage more than Cade Otton. If Otton is utilized, he will break out this year, but if he's not, he may not break out as much as I think he will. Then the tight end 2 is Ko Kieft, who is a 59 overall and their tight end 2. That is not good whatsoever. In 271 snaps last year, Kieft showed fantastic upside as a blocker, but as a receiving tight end, he is not good at all, and I knew that as a prospect. Yet, Kieft with his blocking upside, that gives Tampa the flexibility to run that 2 tight end set under new offensive coordinator Dave Canales. And then there's Payne Durham, who is the 3rd best tight end on this roster as a 5th round rookie. I had an early 7th round grade on him, and I am concerned about how he will translate to the NFL level. The reason for that is because Durham is strictly a receiver, which sure, that is NFL translatable, but he is slow. So if he is a slow receiving tight end, he may be locked down at all times. Yet he is a pretty good red zone threat, so you may want to utilize him in that aspect. So once again, the tight ends get a 62.25. The other tight ends are Dominique Daphne, Tanner Tala, a rookie, and David Wells. And finally, we move forward to the offensive line, which received a 73.31, which is kind of average for an O-line, but they have a big stud on this line with left tackle, or potential left tackle, I should say, Tristan Wirfs, who received a 92 overall. The reason I say potential is because I love the upside that he has at left tackle, but I'm thinking that he should stay at right, simply because he's more experienced at right tackle and he hasn't played a blind side since Iowa. So I was thinking going into the draft, you should probably draft a blind side tackle with that first pick to keep Wirfs on the right side. Now, their 1st round pick in Kalijah Kancey was fantastic, but they only drafted 1 offensive lineman in the entire draft, and that is Cody Mauch, who we'll talk about in a second. Before we get to him, though, we have 3 other guys to discuss. We have Robert Hainsey, a 68 overall left guard. He played center last year, and he probably should be playing center, but I think he should be switching to guard to utilize your best talents on this team. He came out of Notre Dame in the 2021 draft, and I had an early 5th round grade on him. He showed flashes immediately, and he was very solid as a starting center in 2022. He was a reliable pass blocker for sure. He did have run blocking concerns though, but you should still keep letting the kid flow. Then returning to this team, you have Ryan Jensen. He missed a lot of last year to an injury. He only played in the wild card game last year, and he's running out of time as well. He actually turns 32 tomorrow. And yeah, he was horrific in that wild card game this year. He allowed 6 pressures, 4 hurries, 1 sack, and had 1 penalty in 80 snaps. That is not good in one game. But hopefully Jensen is still that reliable center that the Bucs have loved for years now. At right guard, you have Matt Filer, who is a 72 overall. They just picked him up in free agency this year. He ends up being their second best offensive lineman. Filer is very inconsistent, but he's still worth a starting job, I would say. He started the last 2 seasons with the Chargers, and he's seen over 900 snaps the last 4 seasons going into when he had his Pittsburgh stint. But he's also getting old as well. He's 31 years old by the time the season starts, but he's still a very good run blocker. He just allows too much sacks on the inside. And then your final starting offensive lineman, you have rookie Cody Mauch at right tackle, a 67 overall rookie, and this is great value for the offensive line, I would say. He's an extremely versatile option. His lackluster length does take away blindside potential though, which is why he is sticking to right tackle, and Wirfs does end up making the move to left. It's really down to how Tampa utilizes Luke Goedeke, because if they utilize him on the outside, Mauch may play inside. If they bring him back to offensive guard, he may stay to right tackle. And speaking of Luke Goedeke, he is the best offensive lineman off the bench for Tampa Bay. I was not high on him as a prospect at all. I had a mid-4th round grade on him. He went in the mid-2nd round, and there you go. He struggles in 2022. He was just a very lackluster blocker in both pass and run, and he did play his best time at the end of the season when he switched to right tackle. So I'm thinking the Bucs may use him at right tackle and utilize what he's best at. And then after that, it's Nick Leverett, 56 overall. I really liked his injury support in 2022, and he didn't allow a sack in over 500 pass block snaps last year. I just need to see more out of Leverett to give him a better grade. And then finally, also at 56 overall, the final contributor to this rating is Luke Haggard, who is a rookie. He was another very solid undrafted free agency pickup. He was the 42nd best free agent left after the draft, and I had a late 6th round talent on him. While with Indiana, he allowed 6 sacks in 1,135 pass blocking snaps. He's just a very lackluster run blocker overall. So those guys all contribute to the final rating of 73.31. The other guys who did not contribute to the rating are Aaron Stinney, Brandon Walton, Justin Skill, Raekwon O'Neal, Michael Neese, John Mulshon, Chris Murray, Silas Dzanzi, and Grant Hermans. So that rounds out the offense of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which, as I said earlier, received a 72.2, which is 30th in the NFL, 14th in the NFC, and last in the NFC South. So the offense has some studs on it, including Tristan Wirfs, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin, but they also have some duds, including your starting quarterback being Baker Mayfield, your backup wide receivers being rookies, and your tight end room overall being extremely lackluster. But that's enough about the offense. Let's get here into the defense. We're going to start with the edge rushers, which is at a 75.86 overall rating. The best edge rusher on this team is Shaq Barrett, who is down to an 84 overall. He was in the 90s just a couple of years ago, but he's turning 31 mid-season. He dealt with an injury last year, a torn Achilles to be specific, but he remains up there with an 84 because he's still very consistent. He exploded after the Tampa Bay trade, and he's very consistent in both pass and run. He did have a step back in the pass rush in 2022 where he had 1 pressure every 17.4 snaps, but in the run defense, he had a very solid amount of stops and stuffs. Barrett does miss a lot of tackles though. He's been in the double-digit miss rate since 2019, and in 2022, he missed 15.2% of his tackles, which kind of epitomizes the fact that yes, he had a down year. But despite all of these negatives starting to roll in now that he's getting older, he's still an extremely reliable run defender and a solid pass rusher. Behind him is my second of 2 breakout grades on this roster with Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. So I wasn't a fan of him as a prospect overall. I had an early 3rd round grade on him out of Washington. He was a 68 overall 2 years ago. His first year made him stick to a 68, but last year he made a big jump, especially in run defense. As an overall defender, he had 1 stop every 35.4 snaps, which is a big upgrade from 1 every 46.8 in 2021. And Tryon-Shoyinka gets that breakout grade because Shaq Barrett is getting older, and in a couple of years, Tryon-Shoyinka may be a Pro Bowl edge rusher, and potentially this year, he may may be the best edge rusher on this roster. After him, you have Anthony Nelson sitting at a 71 overall. Personally, I don't know a lot about Anthony Nelson, but I dug a bit deep into him, and he's been seeing increased snaps every season. He has heavy upside as a run defender, and he would have a breakout grade if it wasn't for Tryon Shoyinka having a breakout grade instead. And then there's Yaya Diaby, who is a rookie who you selected in the 3rd round. It's not a terrible selection, but I did have a late 4th round grade on him. As a pass rusher, he has natural play strength, and it could provide teams with inside versatility. Buccaneers, I'm not sure, because they typically like to stick their guys to the outside. He will probably stay and play well at an outside linebacker, but any other team could possibly utilize him as a versatile outside linebacker interior D line. But he's not a great tackler in the A and B gaps, which takes away run defense upside. So once again, the edge rushers get a 75.86 overall. The guys who did not contribute to this rating are Hamilcar Rashad, rookie Jose Ramirez, Cam Gill, Charles Snowden, Brandon Boyer Randall, and Marquise Watts. Let's move on here to the interior defensive line, which received a 74.42. So it starts with Vita Vea on the inside at an 82 overall. I do think Vea is a tad on the overrated side, though. I think in 2020, Vea was one of the best, if not the best, interior defensive lineman that isn't named Aaron Donald, but since then, he's taken a couple of steps back, and he's losing touch with his tolerable run defense. Nonetheless, though, Vea is still a specimen on the interior defensive line. He is more of a pass rusher than a run defender. He did have one pressure every 14.55 snaps in 2022. And he's just an extremely disruptive pass rusher who just needs to stop taking steps backwards. After him, you have rookie Kalijah Kancey. I was saying this earlier, I think they should have used his first pick on an offensive tackle. They didn't really have one to choose, though, outside of Anton Harrison, which would have been a little bit of a reach, but still, Kancey is still a fantastic selection with number 19. He was my number 13 overall prospect in this draft, one of my 15 pure first-round talents, and he has huge positional value here for Tampa. Fans should expect yet another good pass rusher on the D-line, this time being an athletic one with great elusive instincts and reactionary decision making. But he is a bit undersized for a defensive lineman. That's why he's been receiving a lot of comparisons to Aaron Donald, who also came out a bit undersized, and they're both from Pitt, so it makes a bit of sense. After Kalijah Kancey, you have Greg Gaines, who I thought was one of the more underrated pickups this year. They got him for 1 year, up to $4 million on his contract, and he's just a very solid rotational lineman. He's probably going to be starting a lot because the backups after Greg Gaines here are not great, but in 2021 he showed off. He had elite run defending instincts in exactly 1,000 snaps, which were 362 run defending snaps. The two other guys who contributed to this rating off the bench, you have Deidrin Sennett with a 65 overall, and Gaines would start coming in and out if it wasn't for Sennett being your next best D lineman. Sennett is primarily a run defender, seeing 2/3 of his snaps in run defense, but we need to see more snaps out of him to give him a better grade. And then there's Logan Hall, who I had a late 3rd round grade on, and he went early 2nd out of Houston. I thought this was a big reach last year, and his rookie season was atrocious. He was one of the league's worst run defenders. He was a mediocre pass rusher, but on the bright side, he didn't miss a single tackle. So the interior defensive lineman once again gets a 74.42 overall. The guys who did not contribute to this rating are not rookies: Patrick O'Connor, CJ Brewer, Mike Green, and Willington Prevalon. Let's move on to the linebackers. They received a 73.67, which a lot of people would think should be higher, but they have one of the most overrated players in the NFL in this linebacker core. We start with Levante David, who got an 83 overall. He is 33, and his talent is about 85, 86, but still he's 33 years old, and that's a little bit concerning in itself. Nonetheless, he's still an elite linebacker year by year, and coverage is easily his best aspect, as he is extremely good at preventing both yards after the catch and touchdowns. After that, his tackling is really good as well, which applies to run support, so he's really good in both pass and run. In the last 2 seasons, he's missed only 7% of his tackles. But as I said before, age can now get in the way at any moment now. And then the most overrated linebacker in the NFL is Devin White. I have him at a 73 overall, and I say that because He had a 78 overall as a rookie. I really liked him coming into the draft, but he is an absolutely horrific tackler and run defender. He's missed at least 13% of his tackles in 3 of his last 4 seasons. He had 14% miss rate in 2022, 15.6 in 2021, and his coverage is also a bit mediocre as well. He's consistently allowing 80% of his targets to be caught, and he's allowed 3 or 4 touchdowns in the last 3 seasons. But on the bright side, he is a 73 because he could be the best blitzing linebacker in the NFL. And then your depth does not help your rating. You start with KJ Britt at linebacker 3. I was high on him as a prospect, which he started at a 64 to start his career, but we haven't seen much out of him whatsoever, and I just can't really point out the positives or the negatives simply because we haven't seen enough. And then after him, you have Servokea Dennis, a rookie out of the 5th round. I did have an early 6th on him, so this was a pretty solid pickup, and he is possibly the best tackling linebacker in this class. He has a fantastic and satisfying wrap-up technique, and he missed only 4.9% of his tackles in 2022. He's also a very solid coverage linebacker, but he does miss in both play strength and instinct. So the linebackers receive a 73.67. The guys who did not contribute are Ulysses Gilbert III, rookie Jeremy Banks, and JJ Russell. So let's move into the secondary, which the cornerbacks received a 76.59 overall, and it starts with one of the most underrated players in the NFL. We talked about Devin White before, one of the most overrated, and now we get to Jamel Dean, an 85 overall, who is one of the most underrated players in the NFL, possibly the most underrated corner. And it starts because he has lockdown coverage at some points. He's locked down DJ Moore, he locked down Drake London twice last year, and he locked down Juju Smith-Schuster. He's also an elite tackler as well, as he missed 1 tackle of 47 solo attempts in 2022. And he's technically already broken out, so I can't give him a breakout grade, sadly. Yet everyone should know his name. And then after him, you have Carlton Davis, who has been a consistent starter over the last 4 seasons. He doesn't really have a flaw in his game, but he also isn't elite either. His coverage is very consistent, allowing 54.7% of a completion percentage in 2022. His tackling is okay. He missed 11% of his tackles in 2022, and he should be utilized more in the pass rush, as in the last 2 seasons, he's played only 14 pass rush snaps, but he has 3 pressures, 2 hits, 1 hurry, and 1 batted pass. And then your guys off the bench, you start with Zion McCollum, who I was a little bit high on him. I had an early 4th round grade on him. He came out of Sam Houston State, so I thought he was a pretty bit underrated as well. But he actually really struggled his rookie season. He missed 8 tackles on 22 tackle attempts, and he allowed 17 catches on 21 targets. Both of those are a recipe for disaster. Hopefully McCollum can improve as the seasons go on. And then after him, there's D. Delaney, who's at a 59 overall. He was fine in his 216 snaps last year. He just took a massive step back in coverage, now allowing over 90% of his catches last season. So the cornerbacks get a 76.59. The other cornerbacks are Anthony Chesley, rookie Josh Hayes, Don Gardner, Deron Lowe, rookie Keenan Isaac, and rookie Derek Pitts. And then on the other half of the secondary, we got the safeties, who is a 71.9 overall. It is a little low considering that your starting safety is Antoine Winfield Jr., one of the best safeties in the NFL. He took a step back from 2021, but he stayed at the same rating due to his age and his development, and his run support is absolutely phenomenal. He missed 3.5% of his tackle attempts in 2022, had 7 tackles for loss in 2022, and has an elite technique that he's been proving since college. And he is still a very good coverage safety. He just had his worst coverage season in 2022, so hopefully he can bring back some better coverage to be one of those elite safeties. And then there's free agency pickup Ryan Neal, who I have at a 71 overall. A lot of people would have him higher, but he was mediocre before he had a breakout 2022. I had him in the high 50 overalls. 2022 comes around and he just absolutely breaks out. So I put him up to a 71. His coverage was fantastic last year. He was great in the yards after catch, and he had 6 pass breakups along with 1 interception. But the problem is everything else is just okay. Hopefully he can continue to improve on his coverage while improving the other aspects of his game. And then after that, you got Nolan Turner at a 56 overall. I had a mid-6th round grade on him going into last year. In his rookie season, he played 1 snap. So he's going to naturally go down as the time goes on, but still, he's still the 3rd best safety on the roster. Your 3rd best safety is an undrafted free agent last year. Your 4th best safety is an undrafted free agent this year. That is Kayvon Merriweather out of Iowa. I have a 53 overall on him, and I thought this was another solid undrafted free agent pickup. If you're not sensing a pattern, especially I just mentioned Nolan Turner, who had a mid-6th round grade on him. They got him as an undrafted free agent. The Buccaneers are really good at finding undrafted talents. Merriweather had an elite coverage year with Iowa in 2022, allowing only 42% of his targets to be caught, but he does lose when it comes to scheme fit and production. So the safeties get a 71.9 overall. There's 2 undrafted rookies that get a little bit of recognition in Christian Isian and Kedrick Whitehead. So that wraps up the defense, which, as I said before, they got a 74.75, which is 11th in the NFL, along with 5th in the NFC and 1st in the NFC South. The first 3 teams that were on this list were 32nd, 31st, and 30th in defense. We take a huge leap here, but the offense of Tampa Bay is not great, and it doesn't continue very well with the special teams, which is a little bit on the average side. The special teams finished with a 71.41, which is 11th in the NFC and last in the NFC South. So for special teams, I do only go over kicker, punter, and return specialists. We start with kicker Chase McLaughlin, who is at a 73, and I don't understand how this man is going to be going to his 8th team in 5 years. He's had a very interesting journey thus far. He still should be that week 1 starter, because his extra point consistency is really up there. He has made 57 of his last 58 extra point attempts, including being 10 from 10 from 20 to 29 yards on field goals. The problem is the deep kick consistency and accuracy. He's 18 for 23 from 40 plus and 9 for 12 from 50 plus. So while McLaughlin is no elite kicker, he should still be a starter in the NFL, which is why I'm saying I don't understand how he's now on his 8th team. Now, the punter is Jake Camarda. He has a chance to be the best punter in the NFL for next season. He's at a 76 overall at the moment. He started at a 70 because all draftable rookies default to start at a 70 for their career, but he's already developing into one of the league's best punters. Under an inconsistent offense, he averaged 49 yards per punt, and he blasted a 74-yard punt against the LA Rams week 9. He also had 27 punts inside the 20-yard line, as well as 11 touchbacks compared to that. But he could become the NFL's best punter, and I almost gave him a breakout grade, but I think I'm going to stray away from giving breakout grades on special teams. As for the returner, you have rookie Trey Palmer at both kick and punt returner. Their return specialists are not great whatsoever, but this is the best option on the team for Tampa. Palmer is both speedy and shifty, as well as bringing enclosed space reactionary movements, so he's very solid in both kick and punt returns. He's just not a 70 overall. I would put him down to about a 68. And of course, we're going to hope that Trey Palmer pans out at wide receiver, but if he doesn't, he could become one of the better return specialists in the NFL if he truly focuses on that. So I always like to keep the special teams short because not a lot of people care about special teams, let's be real. But still, they get a 71.41, as I mentioned before, which is 20th in the NFL, 11th in the NFC, and 4th in the NFC South. So moving on to the final aspect of the team, which is coaching. So for coaching, I'm going to say this in every video, they go from a 0 to 10 scale, 0 being the worst, 10 being the best, and wherever they rank on that 0 to 10 scale, they end up adding 70 to that score. So a 0 out of 10 would get 70, a 10 out of 10 would get 80. The Bucs came out at a 4 out of 10, which is a 74 overall. And it's primarily because I don't like their head coach, straight up. It's Todd Bowles, head coach. He was formerly the Jets head coach, as well as the Bucs defensive coordinator. His first season was last year. They decided to keep him at head coach, but with Arians retiring, they did what they had to do. They didn't bring in a new guy. They just kept it within the team. But last year, Bowles still proved he really doesn't deserve to be a head coach. They went 8-9 with Brady at quarterback, one of Brady's worst records in his career. Of course, they had an issue with Byron Leftwich at offensive coordinator. That is why they fired him. And I understand that Todd Bowles is defensive minded, but still, nonetheless, they had their worst points ranking since 2019 last year. And of course, we all know how much the Jets stint failed. I'm surprised he lasted 4 years in New York. So because of that, I'm still surprised he's got a head coaching job. And at least Tampa Bay has a great offensive coordinator in Dave Canales. I loved this hiring. Tampa's offense should hopefully see an increase despite them having the third worst offense in the NFL talent-wise and having Baker Mayfield at quarterback. Canales worked with Seattle for 13 seasons, including being the wide receivers coach for 8, and then rounding out his stint as a passing game coordinator or quarterbacks coach for Seattle. He developed the likes of Russell Wilson and Geno Smith. I'm going to emphasize Geno Smith. He was the quarterbacks coach, developed him primarily last year as your quarterbacks coach, and Geno Smith had a breakout season. So him developing Geno Smith really got me attached to this hire overall, and it does give Baker breakout potential, but not the breakout grade. And then at defensive coordinator, you share with two people, Casey Rogers and Larry Foote. They get a C. And the reason I say that is because I'm not a fan of two people running the defense, and that just kind of shows that not one person can run this entire defense. And as I said, last season was both of their first seasons at defensive coordinator with the Bucs, and it was a little bit underwhelming. As I said, they had their worst points rank since 2019. So Casey Rogers was the defensive coordinator under Todd Bowles when Bowles was head coach with the Jets, and as I said before, that stint didn't work out. They had to clean house. And most recently, Rogers was the D-line coach from 2019 to 2021. Sure, they developed it well, but now that he's defensive coordinator, you're losing value from Vita Vea. And then as for Larry Foote, he was the outside linebackers coach from 2019 to 2021 with Tampa, and he's been doing a bunch of stuff with Tampa since, which props to him for that. I just don't think he should be defensive coordinator. He's currently the passing game coordinator, the inside linebackers coach, and co-defensive coordinator. So for that reason, the two defensive coordinators get a C, and the overall team gets a 4 out of 10 on coaching, a 74 out of 80 when it comes to the rating. That rounds the Bucs up to tied for 28th in the NFL, tied for 14th, which is last in the NFC, and tied for 3rd, which is last in the NFC South. So with that being said, that was all she wrote for the positional deep dives. So we are going to come back here for the summary. The offense had a 72.2, which is 30th in the NFL, 14th in the NFC, and last in the NFC South. The defense was a 74.75, which was 11th in the NFL, 5th in the NFC, and 1st in the NFC South. The special teams was a 71.41, which is 20th in the NFL, 11th in the NFC, and 4th in the NFC South. And the coaching was a 74 out of 80, which is 28th in the NFL, tied for 14th in the NFC, which is last, and tied for 3rd in the NFC South, which is also last. So as an overall rating, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers get a 73.24, which is 29th in the NFL, 13th in the NFC, and last in the NFC South. So that does it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching another one of these power rankings. I'm really thankful that you guys tune in for the time being, but there's still 28 more power rankings to come. So if you did enjoy this one, please like the video, of course, and subscribe to the channel. There are 28 more teams, 28 more deep dives coming out soon. So once again, I'm Chase Keller from Chase Keller Journalism, and thank you guys so much for choosing this channel as your source of sports coverage. I'll see you guys in the next video.